Hello everybody, and welcome to another video. This video is going to be one of a couple. It's an update video for my progress on trying to get off fossil fuels this year. As I mentioned in some of my previous videos, I've been meaning to do this for a while, but there was lots of little things kept coming up that I kept waiting for the outcome of those so that I could put it into the video, and it just like never really, lots. As soon as one sort of resolved, and then there was another one, and anyway, things have finally resolved to the point where I can start making some video footage about what I've been up to, but now there's so much that I'm not going to be able to really fit it all in one video, so I'm going to split it over a couple of videos. But yeah, this video I'm going to talk about what we had to do to get in a position where we could apply for the grant from the government via the boiler upgrade scheme. Okay, so those of you who've been watching these videos will know that I managed to get everything replaced, really, except the boiler. That's the last thing that we need to get done. And I did start putting out feelers for quotes from various companies, and people came to the house and they sort of looked around and they tried to work out what we would require in terms of a heat pump. But in all cases, they said in order for us to go ahead and take them up on their quotes, we needed to get an EPC done to show that the house was suitable to receive the government boiler upgrade scheme grant of £5,000. So we went through a website to book a person to come out to the house and do an EPC, because our old one had expired long ago. It was done by the previous occupiers of this house before we bought it, so it expired, and so we needed a current one. And so we got a company to come out and do an EPC for us. And as you can see from the screen here, we got an A rating, but we had a score of 92. Recommendations were that we have cavity wall insulation done and floor insulation done to get our energy rating up even higher. Now, the boiler upgrade scheme says that in order to be eligible for the grant, you need to have a current energy performance certificate with no outstanding recommendations for loft or cavity wall insulation. So the recommendation on the EPC that we had done that said about having the floor insulated, we didn't have to worry about that, which is good, because to get the floor insulated would just be astronomically expensive. We'd have to literally rip out the downstairs of the house in order to get the floorboards up and put insulation under them, and then like completely redo the kitchen and everything. It's never going to be worth it to spend that amount of money to get £5,000 off the boiler scheme. So we were never going to do that anyway, but luckily I think they understand that that's for most people going to be ridiculously expensive to do and very disruptive, so they don't mandate that you have to have that one. But they do say you've got to have no recommendations for cavity wall or loft insulation. So we've got a recommendation on our EPC to have the cavity walls insulated. Okay, so in order to be able to qualify for the grant, then we needed to get our cavity walls filled. So the back part of our house was extended by the previous owners before we bought it, a double height extension. It was built in the late 90s, I believe, and that, as it turns out, did already have insulation in the cavities. So it was only the original part of the house that was built in the 1960s, I think, that just had an empty air gap for the cavity. So we contacted a local company who actually specialise in removing cavity wall insulation that's been done badly, and they also fit cavity wall insulation, and so they came out and gave us a quote to do the original part of the house, and that came in at around £850 or so. So we booked them to do that, and it was quite a simple job. They turned up on the day, and they just drill a series of holes every so often, and basically blow these special polystyrene beads with a type of glue, so that they all stick together in one big lump once they've all settled into place. And this is supposedly to stop them. Yeah, if you have to cut into the wall for whatever reason, like potentially if we have a heat pump fitted, they have to cut through the brickwork. They won't all just pour out and blow around in the wind and stuff, which I would not be too happy about. So the fact that they now bond together as a big lump is a real plus. So I was quite happy for them to put that in. It didn't take them very long. It was only sort of like an afternoon thing. They were really good. They generally drill the holes in the sort of cement between the bricks, usually in a corner, so that it's not very visible, and then they just fill it up with a bit more cement when they're finished. And to be honest, I can barely find them now. They're really good. In a couple of places they couldn't get to the walls with ladders to be able to pump the stuff in, so they came from the front of the house and used a big long lance, so they had to make a much bigger hole, and then they could put a big long lance all the way through into the cavity and fill it up from the back, and slowly withdraw the lance forward as they came and fill it up like that. But where they had to cut those bigger holes, went through part of the red bricks. They used a special colour cement, mixed to try and match with the colour of the bricks, and then filled in the hole with that. And again, it's really, really good. I struggled to even find it, even when they told me where it was. I did eventually see it, but it's a really good match. So really pleased with the what they did to make it look as nice as possible. And they were a really good company. I'll try and leave a link to them in the show notes in case anyone might be interested in using the same company. So yes, after we had the cavity wall filled, we then tried to find out whether or not we needed to have an EPC with no recommendations on it, or an EPC with a recommendation on it for cavity wall insulation and a receipt to show that we'd had cavity wall insulation done, whether that was sufficient in order for us to qualify for the grant. As it turns out, you have to have an EPC that has just like no recommendations on it. So that meant that we had to get another EPC done. So we went back to the same place that did our first one, and obviously we had to pay another fee to get them to come and do another one. And when they were typing in all the information that that they'd gleaned from the fact that we now had the cavity walls filled, for some reason they said that the new certificate was now saying that we needed to have additional loft insulation done, even though the original one didn't say that, and as you can see on these screenshots I've shown here. So suddenly they were saying that we would still have a recommendation on there for loft insulation, but because it didn't show up on the original certificate they agreed to hold off doing the certificate to give us a chance to get the loft insulation done, so that we wouldn't have to pay a third fee to get a third EPC done. Loft insulation is pretty simple to do, so I just nipped down to B&Q. Other DIY retailers are available, and I bought about £150 worth of loft insulation. There was already sort of 10 centimeters of insulation in most of the loft already. There were a few places where it wasn't quite that deep, so I bought a roll of 10 mil and filled in those areas where it was not 10 mil currently, and then I bought about 4 or 5 rolls of 200 mil, so 20 centimeter thick insulation to roll over the top of the whole lot. Yeah, you can see what that looks like in these shots here, and you can see that it's really, really significant now. So it's over 300 mil deep of insulation in the loft. And then after going back to the company about the fact that we now had the loft insulation done, they obviously came and checked and measured and took some evidence for their EPC, and finally provided us with the new EPC that shows the only recommendation now being to have the underfloor insulation, which we were never going to do. So the new certificate shows that we now have we still have an A rating, but we now have a score of 96. I assume the highest you can get is 100, and that's probably if you've got some kind of passive house or something. But even if we got the underfloor done, we would only get to 98. But 96 is pretty good. Very happy with that. So there we go. We've got an EPC. We now will qualify for the boiler upgrade scheme, depending on no matter who we go with in terms of a installer for the heat pump. So once we had all that done, we had to. We were still in the process of getting some quotes, so we'd had a couple done already, and we had an initial consultation with Octopus because they fit heat pumps, and this was just like a video consultation where they want you to show them around your house, show them where you'd like the heat pump, what sort of radiators you've got, what sort of pipe work you've got, where your electricity meter is, all those sort of things, just so they can do an initial assessment to decide whether or not it's worth actually sending someone out to your house to do the full heat loss calculations and work out whether or not your property would now be suitable for a heat pump installation. So we did that using my phone. I just walked around showing video in like on a Zoom call type thing, showing them where I wanted the heat pump and all that sort of stuff, and they were quite happy that everything seemed to be okay. There was a little bit of concern that down the side of my house we're very close to the boundary, which is where I want the heat pump to be, and whether or not it will there'll be physically enough space to fit the heat pump plus the associated gap you have to have behind it and in front of it, for it to still fit in and not exceed the limits of where the boundary is. So we measured up a little bit ourselves to try and put our own mind at ease that it would fit, and it's really tight. Based on what they said, it would be you're probably talking about a couple of centimeters clearance, so it's really, really close. they did say that if they decide it's too close, we might have to get planning permission first before we can go ahead and get installation done. So that is a possibility that we might actually have to apply formally for planning permission to have the heat pump where we want it. But we'll find out that in due course. So really, that's probably all I wanted to cover in this video. There is more stuff to come, which I will try and do in another video next week. Because there's been some other things happen as well, some other unexpected things, let's say. So I'll try and discuss those in the next video. But yeah, so far that's where we're at. We've got an EPC. We would qualify for the grant, and really the only thing we now need to do is to finish up with any quotes and decide if or who we want to get to fit the heat pump. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that came up as a course of all that stuff. Oh yes, so obviously I'm still collecting data from my temperature sensors, internal and external. I started at the beginning of this year when I started doing some experiments with the gas-fired boiler to lower the flow temperature. So I'm still collecting that. Unfortunately, we have had to switch the gas back on. I was really hoping to have been able to get a heat pump fitted before the winter came, so that we would never have to switch the gas back on again. But we have unfortunately had to switch the gas back on because of these complications and things taking a bit longer than I had hoped. So I'm still hopeful that there might be a chance we can get it all done this year, but it's looking increasingly less likely, because I think there's quite a wait time. Even if you decide to go ahead with the heat pump, you're still looking at probably about 2 months. So it's getting close. So but anyway, what I was going to say was yeah, I'm still collecting that data, and obviously now we have cavity walls filled, and we have really thick insulation in the loft. So it will be interesting. The boiler is still set to the same lower flow temperature as it was when I was doing the experiments at the beginning of the year. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not all this insulation is having an effect on the amount of gas we're burning to keep the house warm. Now obviously it's still quite mild at the moment, but as we go into the end of October and into November, temperatures should drop a lot more then, and particularly at night time, and hopefully I can find a like-for-like match of a day where the outside temperature was about the same as another day I've got on record, and then I can compare how much gas we burnt on that day before we had the insulation with the amount of gas we're burning now with all the insulation. So I think that'll make quite an interesting an interesting video to show how much you had to spend to get the insulation done, and whether or not it's actually going to save you some money, although it's you really would expect it to. That's what I think would be quite interesting to find that out, and just how much of a difference it makes. So in total we spent about 850 on the having the cavities filled, and then probably about another 150 on the loft insulation. So about £1,000 all in to get the insulation done, and give us the ability to get that £5,000 back. So £1,000 in, we'll be £4,000 better off if we if we do end up going for the heat pump and get the boiler upgrade scheme grant. But even if we decide not to go down that route, we should still benefit from having all that insulation in there. And when I say when we don't go down that route, you know, we're still going to do something, but potentially we might decide to go for an air-to-air heat pump instead of an air-to-water heat pump. So, you know, like an air conditioning system basically, which would give us the flexibility of being able to cool the house in the summer if we get really hot summers like we did this year. But if you go down that route, it's a similar price to having a heat pump fitted, but you don't qualify for the boiler upgrade scheme because those systems do not heat your hot water. They only heat your house, and the upgrade scheme requires that it also has to heat your hot water. And even though I heat my hot water using electricity exclusively, in the summer it's just coming from my spare solar, but in the depths of winter I do heat it from the mains, just using the immersion when electricity is cheap at night. But that's still obviously not as efficient as using a heat pump to heat the water, which you know, for every 1 unit of energy you put in, you would get, you know, 3 or 4 units of heat out to heat the water. So it would definitely be more efficient, and I think that's probably what the government's going for in terms of giving a grant for people to get this stuff. So yeah, we're still going to weigh that up. It depends what the final quotes come in at for the water heat pump, and also whether there's the complications of having to formally apply for planning permission and stuff. So hopefully, yeah, I'll update you all about that in the next video. But that's it for this video. I hope you found that interesting. Please do like, comment, share, subscribe, and yeah, ding the little notification bell if you want to be notified when I upload the next video, which will be soon, hopefully. And I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.